The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was huge. Thousands of beings from across the stars sat in their special seats. Each race had their own section. The blue-skinned Zephyrians sat in their cold metal chairs. The floating ethereals glowed softly in their energy pods. The insect-like mantids clicked their claws on stone benches. At the center of it all, humans sat in simple wooden chairs. Taman looked at his datapad. The vote was almost over. For 300 years, humans had worked with these alien races. They had stopped wars. They had saved lives. They had helped solve problems that seemed impossible. But today was different. The vote was about humans themselves. The other races said human emotions were bad. They said feelings made humans weak and stupid. They wanted to make a new law. This law would say that emotional beings could not make important decisions for the galaxy. Da-Yun sat in the visitor area above the main floor. She was a scientist who studied different alien life forms. She had worked with humans for 50 years. She watched Taemin's face as the votes came in. His eyes were calm. Too calm, one by one, each race voted. The Zephyrians voted yes. They always chose logic over feelings. The Crystalline Collective voted yes. They were living crystals who did not understand emotions at all. The Aquarians voted yes, even though humans had saved their homeworld from a terrible disease. The Mantids voted yes. This hurt the most. Humans had stopped a war between the Mantids and their enemies just 5 years ago. Thousands of Mantid children were alive because human negotiators had found a way to make peace. Each yes vote felt like a knife, but Taemin did not move. His face showed nothing. Woojin sat behind Taemin. He was the human military officer on the council. His hands were folded in his lap. He did not speak. He did not look angry, but Da-Un could see something in his eyes. It was not anger. It was something much worse. It was the look of someone who had learned a terrible truth. Hee-Wan was the trade representative. She had helped create trade agreements between dozens of species. Her work had made many planets rich. She had found ways for different races to share resources and knowledge, but now she sat like a statue. Her breathing was slow and steady. The final votes came in. The law passed by just one vote. The council speaker, a tall Zephyrian named Chancellor Veltar, announced the result. His voice echoed through the Great Hall. The motion passes. Emotional decision-making is hereby deemed incompatible with advanced galactic governance. Species demonstrating primary emotional responses will be restricted from leadership positions in critical council functions. The words hung in the air like poison. 300 years of human service meant nothing. All the lives saved, all the wars stopped, all the problems solved. None of it mattered. The galaxy had decided that human hearts were a weakness. Taemin closed his datapad with a soft click. The sound was very quiet, but somehow everyone heard it. He stood up slowly. His chair made no noise as he pushed it back. The other council members expected him to speak. They waited for him to argue. They thought he would ask them to change their minds. They expected anger or sadness or desperate pleading. Instead, Taemin turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. Behind him, Woojin stood up. Then Hee-Wan, then every other human in the building. They moved like water flowing downhill, smooth and unstoppable. No one spoke. No one looked back. The sound of their footsteps was like a drum beat. Chancellor Veltar called out from his high seat. Ambassador Taemin, surely this is just a temporary emotional reaction. The council values human contributions in non-leadership roles. Your people can still serve the galaxy in appropriate capacities. Taemin did not stop walking. He did not turn around. He did not speak. This is a minor policy adjustment, the Chancellor continued. His voice was getting higher. There is no need for dramatic gestures. The Council remains open to human participation within the new guidelines. Still no response. The humans kept walking. Other Council members started to speak. The Aquarian representative stood up. Perhaps we can discuss modifications to the resolution, she said quickly. The human contributions to our plague research were significant. Surely we can find a compromise. The Mantid war leader clicked his mandibles nervously. The human peacekeepers have served with honor. This council recognizes their past achievements. But the humans did not slow down. They reached the great doors at the end of the hall. These doors were massive, made from metal found in the heart of a dead star. They had been built to show the power and permanence of the council. Taemin reached for the door handle. Behind him, 97 other humans waited. Every human diplomat, every human scientist, every human officer assigned to the council was leaving. The doors opened with a deep sound like thunder. Bright light from the station's artificial sun flooded into the dark hall. For a moment, the humans were just shadows against the light. Then they stepped through. One by one, they walked out of the council chambers, out of the station, out of the galaxy's government forever. The doors closed behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. The sound echoed through the hall for a long time. When it finally stopped, the silence was complete. Doan looked around the hall. Thousands of beings sat in their seats, but no one moved. No one spoke. Something had just happened, but none of them understood what it was. They had expected a fight. They had prepared for arguments and negotiations. They had planned for human anger and desperate bargaining. But they had not prepared for this. They had not prepared for humans to simply leave. In the silence that followed, many council members felt something they had not expected. It was not relief or satisfaction. It was something much worse. It was the cold, empty feeling of getting exactly what they had asked for. The vote was over. The humans were gone. The galaxy's most troublesome emotional species had been put in their place. So why did victory feel so much like loss? Outside the Great Hall, the humans walked through the station's corridors. Their footsteps echoed off the walls. But they were not just walking away from a meeting. They were walking away from 3 centuries of service. They were walking away from a galaxy that had decided it did not need human hearts. The station's other residents watched them go. Many of them had worked with humans for years. They had expected this day to end with negotiations, with compromise, with some kind of solution. Instead, they watched the best mediators, healers, and peacekeepers in the galaxy walk away without saying a single word. And in that silence, something broke that could never be fixed. 3 days passed since the council vote. Across the galaxy, human settlements received the same message. It came directly from Earth's government. The message was short and clear. Return all council property and all humanitarian missions. Come home immediately. Jin-Ho stood on the bridge of his ship, the Resilience. He was a captain in Earth's deep space fleet. For 15 years, he had carried medicine and supplies to worlds in need. His crew had saved thousands of lives. Now he stared at the message on his screen and felt something die inside him. His first officer, an alien named Krixta, looked at him with her large yellow eyes. She was from the Insect Federation. Her people had been enemies of humans once, but Jin-Ho had helped make peace between their species. "Captain," she said in her clicking voice, "surely this is a mistake. Your people would not abandon the relief missions. The Outer Rim colonies depend on these supplies." Jin-Ho looked at her for a long moment. Then he touched his communication panel. "All crew members, this is the captain. We are returning to Earth immediately. All non-human crew will be transferred to other vessels at the next station." Krixta's antennae drooped. "But Captain, the children on Kepler 442b are still sick. The medical supplies we carry are the only thing keeping them alive." "I have my orders," Jin-Ho said quietly. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he entered the new course into the ship's computer. On Kepler 442b, Dr. So-Young was packing her medical equipment. The research station around her was busy with activity, but it was the wrong kind of activity. Instead of treating patients, her staff was packing boxes and loading transport ships. So-Young had spent 8 years on this world. She had come here to study a disease called the crystalline plague. This sickness affected 3 different alien species. It turned their bodies into living crystal, slowly and painfully. For years, no one could cure it. But So-Young and her team had found something. They had discovered that human emotions somehow helped in the healing process. When human doctors treated the patients got better faster. When humans sang to them or held their hands, the crystal growth stopped spreading. The local aliens could not understand it. Their own doctors were more skilled. Their medical technology was more advanced. But somehow human doctors saved patients that alien doctors could not help. Now alien patients filled the waiting areas outside the medical center. Their crystal-covered bodies reflected the light like broken glass. They had heard that the humans were leaving. They had come to beg them to stay. A young Zephyrian girl approached So-Young. Half of her face was covered in blue crystal growths. She spoke in broken human language. "Dr. So-Young, please not go. I get better when you sing to me. Crystals stop growing when you hold my hand. Please stay." So-Young knelt down next to the girl. She touched the child's face gently. being careful not to hurt the crystal growths. I have given all our research to your local doctors. They will take good care of you. But they not make crystal stop like you do, the girl said. Tears ran down her face, both the normal side and the crystal side. So Young stood up. She could not look at the girl anymore. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she walked to her transport ship. Behind her, hundreds of sick aliens watched the humans leave. They did not understand why this was happening. 3 days ago, everything had been normal. Now the only doctors who could really help them were going away forever. Far across the galaxy, Colonel Dong-hyun was loading the last of his peacekeeping equipment onto transport ships. He had been stationed on a small moon between two warring species. The mantids and the serpentines had been fighting for 50 years. The war had killed millions of beings on both sides. For 15 years, Dong-hyun and his human peacekeepers had kept the peace. They had created a neutral zone where both species could meet safely. They had helped negotiate treaties and prisoner exchanges. Most importantly, they had learned to understand both species well enough to prevent small problems from becoming big wars. The mantids were proud warriors. They valued honor above everything else. The serpentines were cautious and fearful. They attacked only when they thought they were in danger. These two ways of thinking made peace almost impossible. But humans understood both sides. Dong-hyun could speak to mantid warriors about honor and courage. Then he could turn around and help serpentines feel safe and protected. Somehow humans could see what both species needed, even when they could not see it themselves. Now Dong-hyun watched his soldiers pack up the last of their equipment. Mantid and serpentine representatives stood nearby, watching with growing fear. General Thakmor of the mantids approached Dong-hyun. The insect-like alien's claws clicked nervously. Colonel, my people do not understand. Have we offended you somehow? Has our behavior been dishonorable? Before Dong-hyun could answer, Ambassador Sisleth of the Serpentine slithered over. Her snake-like body moved in worried patterns. Colonel, are you leaving because we have become a threat to you? We meant no harm to your people. Dong-hyun looked at both aliens. These two beings represented species that had been killing each other for decades, but right now they were united in their confusion and fear. You have done nothing wrong, Dong-hyun said. This decision comes from higher authority. But who will keep the peace? General Thakmor asked.
Who will help us avoid the small misunderstandings that lead to big battles?
The council will send new peacekeepers, Dong-hyun replied. But even as he said it, he did not believe it would work. The council's other species were too logical. They would see the rules and the treaties, but they would not see the fear in a serpentine's eyes or the desperate need for respect in a mantid's posture. The last transport ship loaded its cargo. Dong-hyun climbed aboard with his remaining soldiers. As the ship lifted off, he looked down at the neutral zone they were abandoning. In the distance, he could see mantid and serpentine military bases. Both sides were already moving troops closer to the border. The war would start again within days. Everyone knew it. But there was nothing Dong-hyun could do about it now. All across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human teachers left their alien students. Human negotiators walked away from peace talks. Human doctors abandoned their patients. Human engineers stopped building the projects that connected different worlds. At the Galactic Council Station, emergency meetings were happening every hour. Council members who had voted to restrict human leadership were starting to panic. They had expected humans to argue and negotiate. They had planned to offer compromises and partial solutions. Instead, humans were simply leaving. Not just the council, but everything. Every human mission, every human project, every human relationship with alien species was ending. Chancellor Veltar called Earth's government over and over. His messages went unanswered. Other council members tried to contact human friends and colleagues. No one responded. It was as if humanity had decided to cut itself off from the rest of the galaxy completely. They were not fighting the council's decision. They were not protesting or demanding changes. They were just leaving. And with every human ship that jumped to hyperspace, with every human base that shut down, with every human doctor or teacher or negotiator who packed up and went home, the galaxy became a little bit colder. The alien species that remained did not understand what they had lost. They thought humans were just angry. They thought this was a temporary reaction that would pass. They expected humans to come back when they cooled down, but humans were not coming back. For the first time in 300 years, the galaxy would have to solve its own problems. It would have to heal its own sick, stop its own wars, and build its own peace. The question was, could they do it without human hearts to guide them? 6 months had passed since the last human ship left Council space. Young-Soo sat in Earth's deep space monitoring station, watching the galaxy tear itself apart. His job was to listen to alien communications and write reports. What he heard made him sick to his stomach. The first major disaster happened at the Kepler 442b medical colony. Without human doctors, the crystalline plague spread like wildfire. The local alien doctors tried everything they knew. They used the research data that Dr. So-Young had left behind. They followed every procedure exactly as written, but the patients kept dying. Young-Soo listened to desperate radio calls from the planet's surface. "We need human medical assistance immediately," a Zephyrian doctor broadcast. "Patient mortality rates have increased by 300%. We cannot explain why our treatments are failing." The answer was simple, but the aliens could not see it. Humans had not just been treating the disease with medicine. They had been treating it with hope, with comfort, with the strange human ability to care about strangers as if they were family. When human doctors held a patient's hand, something happened that medical scanners could not measure. When they sang lullabies to frightened children, the crystal growths actually slowed down. When they stayed awake all night watching over the sickest patients, those patients somehow found the strength to fight harder. Alien doctors could copy human medical procedures, but they could not copy human hearts. They gave patients the right medicine at the right time, but they could not give them hope. Within 4 months, 3 entire species on Kepler 442b faced extinction. Their desperate messages flooded the communication networks. "Why did the humans leave us? What did we do wrong? Please come back." But the messages went unanswered. The second disaster was even worse. The war between the mantids and serpentines had restarted exactly as Colonel Dong-hyun had predicted. But this time, there were no human peacekeepers to contain it. The council sent their best diplomatic team to replace the humans. The team was led by a brilliant Zephyrian strategist named Velkoth. He understood military tactics perfectly. He could analyze battle plans and predict troop movements with mathematical precision, but he could not understand why the Mantid general refused to accept a perfectly logical peace treaty. Young-Soo listened to the failed peace talks through intercepted communications. Velkoth's voice was cold and logical as always. "General Thakmor, this treaty gives your people everything they have demanded: territory, resources, military bases. Why do you reject it?" The Mantid general's response came through the translator as a series of clicks and hisses. "You do not understand honor, Zephyrian. This treaty is written by those who see us as numbers on a chart, not as warriors with pride." "Honor is irrelevant," Velkoth replied. "This treaty serves your practical needs efficiently." The communication ended with the sound of General Thakmor destroying his radio equipment. The war continued with new intensity. The problem was simple but invisible to logical minds. When Colonel Dong-hyun had negotiated with the Mantids, he had started every meeting by honoring their warrior traditions. He had praised their courage and spoken of their glorious history. Only then had he discussed practical matters. This was not just politeness. This was recognition that the Mantids needed to feel respected before they could feel safe enough to make peace. Dong-hyun had understood that their pride was not just ego. It was armor that protected them from deep fears of being forgotten or dismissed, but Velkoth saw such behavior as inefficient emotional manipulation. He presented facts and expected rational decisions. When the Mantids responded with violence instead of logic, he was genuinely confused. The Serpentines were equally impossible for him to understand. When they attacked Mantid supply lines, Velkoth calculated that this was a poor military strategy. The attacks were too small to do serious damage, but big enough to provoke massive retaliation. What Velkoth could not see was that the Serpentines were not trying to win a military victory. They were trying to feel safe. Their attacks were like a frightened animal, striking out at anything that came too close. The more threatened they felt, the more they attacked, even when those attacks made them less safe. Human peacekeepers had understood this. They had found ways to help the Serpentines feel protected without needing to attack. They had created safe spaces and built trust slowly and carefully. But the Council's new peacekeepers saw the Serpentine attacks as evidence of aggressive intentions. They responded with stronger defenses and more restrictions, which made the Serpentines feel even more trapped and dangerous. Within months, the small border conflict became a full-scale war. Entire star systems burned as both species fought with desperate fury. Other alien races chose sides or fled the region entirely. Young-Soo watched the casualty reports climb higher every day. Millions of beings died in battles that human negotiators could have prevented with a few careful words and genuine understanding. But the disasters were not limited to war and disease. The galaxy's entire cultural foundation began to crumble. Mina had been Earth's cultural liaison to the Aquarian colonies. She had developed art therapy programs for aliens suffering from trauma and depression. These programs had been incredibly successful. Alien patients who had given up all hope somehow found reasons to live again when they painted or sang or wrote stories with human guidance. The Aquarian government tried to continue these programs without human help. They hired the best Aquarian psychologists and artists. They followed Mina's written procedures exactly, but the programs failed completely. Young-Soo received a desperate message from an old Aquarian friend, a poet named Trilweth. "We tried to help our people the way you taught us," the message said. "We gave them paints and brushes. We asked them to express their feelings, but they just stared at the blank canvases and cried." The problem was that human art therapy had never been about the painting or singing. It had been about having someone who truly cared about your pain witness your expression of it. When humans guided these sessions, they did not just teach technique. They shared emotional connection. When Mina had worked with a traumatized Aquarian veteran, she had not just handed him a paintbrush. She had sat beside him and felt his pain as if it were her own. She had cried when he cried, celebrated when he found moments of beauty, and somehow convinced him that his suffering mattered to someone else in the universe. Aquarian therapists could copy the actions, but they could not copy the caring. They saw art therapy as a medical procedure to be performed correctly, but humans had seen it as sharing the burden of existence with another living being. Without that emotional connection, the therapy became just playing with paints while feeling alone. Similar failures cascaded across every field where humans had worked. Trade agreements collapsed when the careful relationships that human negotiators had built dissolved into simple profit calculations. Educational programs failed when alien teachers tried to copy human methods without understanding that human teaching was really about believing in each student's potential. Even the simplest human jobs became impossible for aliens to replace. Human janitors had somehow made other beings feel valued and seen. Human cooks had prepared food that comforted souls as well as bodies. Human mechanics had fixed machines while making their owners feel heard and understood. Young-Soo compiled report after report documenting the collapse. Every week brought new disasters, new failures, new evidence that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. The most heartbreaking messages came from individual aliens who had worked closely with humans. They did not understand what had gone wrong. They only knew that their world had become colder and lonelier. "We follow all the procedures the humans taught us," one message said, "but somehow everything feels empty now. Like we are going through the motions of living but missing the reasons why life matters." Another message was even simpler. "We didn't know what you gave us until you were gone. Please help us understand what we lost." But Earth remained silent. Young-Soo's job was to listen and report, not to respond. The galaxy's desperate pleas for explanation, for help, for any kind of human contact went unanswered. As he compiled his monthly report, Young-Soo realized that the galaxy's collapse was not really about losing human skills or knowledge. The aliens could eventually learn to perform most human functions. What they had lost was something much more fundamental. They had lost the species that had taught the galaxy how to care about itself. Without human hearts to show them what love looked like, the other species were slowly forgetting how to value their own existence. The galaxy was dying not from war or disease, but from loneliness. 1 year after humanity's departure, Chaewon received a message that changed everything. She was Earth's final message keeper, the last human whose job was to monitor communications from the Council. For months she had listened to demands, threats, and pleas, but this message was different. It came directly from Chancellor Veltar of the Zephyrian Council. The message was not angry or desperate. It was a simple question. What made you different from us? Chaewon stared at the message on her screen. For a year, the council had been trying to understand why their perfectly logical solutions kept failing. They had replaced human functions with more efficient alien alternatives. They had assigned their best minds to solve the problems humans used to handle. But nothing worked the way it was supposed to. The message continued. We have studied your methods extensively. We have replicated your procedures with mathematical precision, yet our results are consistently inferior to what humans achieved with seemingly less advanced techniques. We do not understand the variable we are missing. Chaewon forwarded the message to Earth's government, but she knew they would not respond. Humanity had chosen silence, and they would maintain it. But the question haunted her. What had made humans different? Across the galaxy, other species were asking the same question. Il-sung monitored council sessions from Earth's intelligence networks. He watched as one representative after another confessed their failures. The Christek Collective had replaced human teachers in over 200 schools. Their AI systems could deliver information with perfect accuracy. They could answer any question a student might ask. They could adjust their teaching methods instantly based on each student's learning patterns. But something was wrong. Test scores had improved, but student curiosity had disappeared. Children learned facts efficiently, but stopped asking questions. They memorized information, but showed no interest in exploring new ideas. The collective's education director, a mechanical being called Unit 457, addressed the council with confusion in its electronic voice. We have enhanced educational efficiency by 340%, Unit 457 reported. Students retain 95% more information than under human instruction. Yet psychological evaluations show declining motivation and creativity. We cannot identify the cause of this contradiction. Il-sung knew the answer, but the Christek Collective could not see it. Human teachers had not just transferred information to students. They had shared their own excitement about learning. When a human teacher explained how stars were born, their eyes would light up with wonder. When they taught history, they would speak as if ancient events were personal adventures. Students had not just learned from human teachers. They had caught enthusiasm like a contagious disease. Human curiosity had infected young alien minds and taught them that learning was not a chore, but a thrilling exploration of the universe. AI teachers could provide perfect information, but they could not provide wonder. They could answer questions, but they could not inspire students to ask better questions. They had replaced human knowledge but missed human passion entirely. Similar reports came from every field. The Harmonic Consortium had analyzed human lullabies and created mathematically perfect songs for comforting distressed children. The melodies were more beautiful than anything humans had ever composed. The rhythms were precisely calibrated to reduce stress hormones, but the songs did not work. Children who heard the perfect AI lullabies cried harder than before. Parents reported that the beautiful melodies somehow made their children feel more lonely, not less. The consortium's lead musician, a being called Resonance Prime, could not understand the failure. Our compositions are objectively superior to human songs in every measurable way, Resonance Prime told the council. The harmonic structures are more complex. The emotional cues are more precisely targeted, yet subjects report increased distress rather than comfort. This outcome defies logical analysis. Il-sung understood what the consortium had missed. Human lullabies had never been about perfect music. They had been about love made audible. When a human sang to a crying child, the child heard not just melody but the voice of someone who cared deeply about their well-being. The imperfections in human songs, the slight wavering of tired voices, the repeated simple words, the gentle humming between verses, these had not been flaws to be corrected. They had been proof that a real person was spending their time and energy to provide comfort. AI songs could be more beautiful, but they could not be more caring. They offered perfect technique without the emotional connection that made lullabies actually work. The most devastating report came from the medical sector. Dr. Zixthal of the Ethereal Healing Collective had taken over human medical duties in 17 star systems. His people were master healers with technology far beyond human capabilities. They could repair tissue damage that human doctors could never touch. They could cure diseases that human medicine could barely understand. But their patients were dying at higher rates than ever before. We have eliminated 73% of the medical errors that occurred under human care, Dr. Zixthal reported to the council. Our diagnostic accuracy has improved by over 400%. Our surgical success rates have reached levels human doctors never achieved. He paused, and Il-sung could hear confusion in the alien doctor's ethereal voice. Yet patient survival rates have decreased by 31% across all categories of illness. Patients with identical conditions and identical treatments show worse outcomes than they did under human care. We have found no medical explanation for this phenomenon. The explanation was not medical at all. Il-sung had access to the detailed reports, and he could see what the ethereal doctors could not understand. Human doctors had treated more than just physical symptoms. They had somehow treated the patient's will to live. When a human doctor held a patient's hand and said, "You're going to be okay," something happened that medical scanners could not measure. The patient's immune system would work a little harder. Their body would fight a little longer. Their spirit would find reasons to survive that they had not had before. Ethereal doctors provided superior medical care, but they could not provide hope. They fixed bodies with perfect precision, but they could not touch souls. Without human doctors to help patients believe in their own recovery, many simply gave up the fight against illness. The most honest report came from General Kriegsvar of the Mantid Military Command. He had been assigned to replace human peacekeepers in 12 conflict zones. His strategies were flawless. His tactical knowledge was superior to any human commander, but every peace treaty he negotiated collapsed within weeks. "I do not understand the failure," General Kriegsvar told the council. "My peace agreements are more comprehensive than human treaties. They address military positioning, resource allocation, territorial boundaries, and enforcement mechanisms with precision that human documents lacked." He clicked his mandibles in frustration. Yet every negotiation ends in resumed hostilities. The opposing parties sign the agreements, then immediately begin planning to break them. Human peacekeepers somehow prevented this behavior, but I cannot identify their methods from the official records. Il-sung knew that human peacekeeping had never been recorded in official documents. The real work had happened in private conversations, in shared meals, in moments of genuine connection between human negotiators and alien warriors. When Colonel Dong-hyun had made peace between enemies, he had not just written better treaties. He had somehow helped each side see their opponents as fellow beings rather than faceless threats. He had found ways to address the fears and needs that drove conflicts, not just the territorial disputes that resulted from them. Mantid generals had trusted him not because his plans were logical, but because he had convinced them that he genuinely cared about Mantid honor and survival. Serpentine commanders had worked with him not because his strategies were efficient, but because he had made them feel safe enough to take risks for peace. General Kriegsvar could copy human tactics, but he could not copy human empathy. He could write better treaties, but he could not build the relationships that made those treaties worth keeping. The reports continued for hours. Every alien replacement for human workers had achieved technical improvements, while somehow making everything worse. They had optimized human functions while losing the essence that made those functions work. Finally, Chancellor Veltar himself addressed the council. The Zephyrian leader who had dismissed human emotions as primitive now spoke with something that sounded almost like desperation. "We must acknowledge a disturbing possibility," he said. "Human emotional responses may not have been weaknesses to be eliminated. They may have been capabilities we do not possess." The council chamber fell silent. For a species that prided itself on logic and efficiency, this admission was almost impossible to make. "We assumed that human emotions interfered with their decision-making processes," Veltar continued. "But evidence suggests that human emotions were their decision-making processes. They did not think despite their feelings. They thought with their feelings." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that Il-sung had never heard from a Zephyrian before. "We may have dismissed the galaxy's most sophisticated intelligence system as primitive, simply because we could not understand how it operated." 2 years after humanity's silent departure, the Galactic Council held its most important session in history. Every species that had voted against human leadership was there. Every representative who had called human emotions primitive was present. But this was not a normal council meeting. This was a confession. Sejun monitored the session from Earth's observation posts. He had watched the galaxy crumble for 2 years. He had documented every failure, every disaster, every moment of growing realization. But nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed that day. Chancellor Veltar stood at the center of the Great Hall. The same Zephyrian who had announced humanity's restriction from leadership now spoke with a broken voice. "We call this session to formally acknowledge our error," he began. "We voted to limit human participation because we believed their emotional responses were weaknesses. We have learned that we were wrong. We have learned that human emotions were not primitive reactions, but sophisticated capabilities that we completely failed to understand." One by one, representatives from every major species stepped forward to speak. Each confession was more devastating than the last. The ethereal collective speaker flickered, with patterns that Sejun's translation software identified as deep shame. "We believe that perfect logic would produce perfect results," the ethereal said. "We replaced human negotiators with our most advanced thinking systems. We created solutions that were mathematically flawless and completely useless." The speaker's light dimmed as it continued. Human negotiators did not just solve problems. They understood problems. When they mediated disputes, they saw not just the surface issues but the deep fears and needs that created those issues. They treated causes while we treated only symptoms. The Aquarian ambassador spoke next. Her water form shifted into shapes that expressed grief. "We thought human tears were signs of weakness," she said. "We did not understand that human tears were signs of connection. When humans cried for our pain, they were not being inefficient. They were sharing our burdens and making them lighter." She paused, and her form rippled with emotion. "We lost our greatest therapists not because they lacked skill, but because they possessed a form of skill we could not recognize. Human empathy was not emotional contamination. It was emotional medicine." The Christech Collective's Unit 457 rolled forward on its mechanical tracks. Its electronic voice carried what sounded almost like regret. "Analysis of educational outcomes reveals critical error in our assessment," Unit 457 announced. Human teachers did not just transfer information. They transferred enthusiasm. Student learning was enhanced not by data accuracy, but by instructor passion. The machine paused, its lights blinking in patterns that might have been confusion. "We cannot replicate human enthusiasm because we do not understand its source." Humans appeared to find genuine excitement in sharing knowledge with young minds. This excitement was contagious and produced learning outcomes superior to our optimized systems. The testimonies continued for hours. Each species admitted the same fundamental error. They had assumed that human success came despite human emotions, when it actually came because of human emotions. Dr. Zixthal of the Ethereal Healing Collective spoke about medical failures. Human doctors achieved superior results not through advanced techniques, but through advanced caring, he admitted. When human medical personnel told patients they would recover, patients believed them. This belief became a medical intervention more powerful than many of our technologies. His ethereal form grew dimmer as he continued. "We can heal bodies with precision that humans never achieved, but we cannot heal spirits. Without human doctors to convince patients that their lives have value, many patients lose the will to fight for recovery. We discovered that hope is a medicine we cannot manufacture." General Thakmor of the Mantids stepped forward, his warrior's armor scarred from the ongoing war with the Serpentines. "Human peacekeepers ended conflicts that had raged for centuries," he said. "We assumed their success came from superior strategies. We were wrong. Their success came from superior understanding." The Mantid general's mandibles clicked in what Sejun recognized as deep respect. Colonel Donghyun did not just negotiate treaties. He negotiated relationships. He understood that Mantid honor was not arrogance, but armor protecting deep fears of being forgotten. He understood that Serpentine aggression was not cruelty, but desperation born from feeling constantly threatened. General Thakmor looked directly at the Council's recording devices, as if speaking to the absent humans. Human peacekeepers saw what we needed before we understood it ourselves. They treated our fears instead of just our symptoms. Without them, we have returned to killing each other because no one else understands why we fight. The most heartbreaking testimony came from beings who had worked closely with humans. They spoke not as government representatives, but as individuals who had lost friends. Trilweth, the Aquarian poet, had sent a message to be read at the session. "Humans taught us that art was not just about creating beauty, but about sharing souls," the message said. When human cultural liaison Mina guided our art therapy sessions, She did not just teach techniques. She taught us that our pain mattered to someone else in the universe. The message continued with words that made the entire council chamber fall silent. We thought human empathy was weakness, because it made them cry when others suffered. We did not understand that crying for others' pain was the most advanced form of intelligence in the galaxy. It was the ability to expand your own existence to include the well-being of other beings. Chancellor Veltar returned to the center of the chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that Sejun had never heard from any alien before. We have discovered that human emotions were not primitive reactions, but sophisticated processing systems, Veltar announced. Humans did not think despite their feelings. They thought with their feelings. Their emotions were not obstacles to intelligence, but components of intelligence. He paused, and the silence stretched across the vast hall. We voted to eliminate what we saw as inefficiency. Instead, we eliminated the galaxy's capacity for wisdom. We confused intelligence with logic, but humans showed us that true intelligence includes the ability to care about the consequences of our actions. The Chancellor's next words would be remembered throughout galactic history. Human emotions were not weaknesses to be overcome. They were capabilities we do not possess. Humans could feel the rightness or wrongness of decisions in ways that pure logic cannot calculate. They could sense solutions that mathematical analysis cannot reach. They could understand needs that systematic observation cannot detect. Veltar looked at each section of the council chamber, meeting the eyes or optical sensors of every representative present. We dismissed human hearts as primitive because we could not understand how they worked. But human hearts were the most advanced problem-solving systems in the galaxy. They could process emotional data, social connections, moral implications, and long-term consequences, simultaneously and instantaneously. The session concluded with a formal statement that would be transmitted across the galaxy. The Galactic Council formally acknowledges that human emotional intelligence was not a weakness to be restricted, but a strength to be treasured. We understand now that we did not vote to limit primitive reactions. We voted to eliminate the galaxy's conscience. The final message was addressed directly to Earth. Humans of Earth, we understand now what we lost when you departed. We lost not just skilled workers, but the species that taught the galaxy how to care about itself. We lost our mediators, our healers, our teachers, and our guides. Most importantly, we lost our friends. Chancellor Veltar's voice broke as he delivered the closing words. We ask not just for your return, but for your forgiveness. We understand that we cannot undo the vote that drove you away. We cannot repair the trust we broke. We cannot restore the relationships we destroyed with our ignorance and arrogance. He paused one final time. But we want you to know that we understand now what made you irreplaceable. It was not your technologies or your strategies or your procedures. It was your capacity to love beings who were not even your own species. It was your ability to care about the galaxy's well-being as if it were your own family. The message ended with a simple plea. Please help us learn to be worthy of your friendship again. On Earth, Ji-won received the message in her office at the Global Communication Center. She was humanity's final ambassador, the last human whose job was to maintain contact with alien species. Around her, 6 billion humans had turned inward, building a civilization based on the emotional intelligence that the galaxy had dismissed. She read the council's message 3 times. Then she filed it away without sending a response. Outside her window, human cities sparkled with a warmth that alien technologies had never achieved. Human schools taught children not just facts but wonder. Human hospitals healed not just bodies but spirits. Human communities cared for their members with a devotion that efficiency experts would call wasteful, but that made life worth living. Humanity had learned to value what made them unique. They had discovered that their greatest strength was not their technology or their knowledge, but their infinite capacity to care about each other and about life itself.